India. Well, there's more dust, more sun, more mosquitoes, more cars.
Anything positive?
Oh, the mangoes. Oh, you won't believe the mangoes.
I'm Ujjal Dosanjh, born and raised in India in the state of Punjab in September of 1947, shortly after India became independent after the partition. Well, my father had a family of two, which means he and his brother had no sisters. They were from a poor family. Their father had died when he was very young. And his mother, my grandmother, actually brought them up and looked after the land, whatever little land we had. And eventually my father actually went to school and was one of the first few people to go to school and high school. And over time he did the equivalent of a BA and became a teacher and founded the high school in the village which I attended. And the first 4 years of my education, the elementary school, it was with my maternal grandfather. But in a school that he had started, I was one of the first students in that school. The school was started in the house of the Muslims who had to left in the partition of India. And my grandfather, maternal grandfather, was a freedom fighter. He spent many years in British jails. And, I learned a lot from him because freedom fighters used to come visit him at his home. Similarly, my father was also a political activist, so a lot of political leaders would come and visit him there. So I grew up with politics around me and understanding that it's wonderful to be able to disagree without killing each other. And, I went to school, of course, at my mom's village, my maternal grandfather's village, and then went to high school at my village, Dosanjh Kala, at my father's school. And when I did grade 10 matriculation in 1962, that's when he retired from teaching in the school that he had started in 1932. So I then went to college in Fagwada, which is an industrial town a few miles from my village. I used to ride a bike every day, and there I did grade 11 and left grade 12 in the middle of it and came to England in 1964. Like most people, there are many memorable moments in my life, but one of the most important, I think, was the time when my maternal grandfather took me away from my village to his village. That's when I started my grade 1 to 4 education at his village. And I didn't know I was leaving. I was woken up early in the morning and my mother gave me some yogurt and milk and food. And they put me on the ox cart that my grandfather had. He was taking to his village with 2 oxen. And they put me in the middle of the cart with the quilts that were made for the ox, actually, to keep me warm. It was winter, and we had a 20-mile ride on the ox cart that day, and stopped at various places, feeding the oxen and feeding ourselves with tea and burfi and other things in the little shops that were on the way. That was the most memorable time of my life in the sense that I was taken away to another place to live elsewhere away from my mom and dad. And I think that had a great impact on me in the sense I became very close to my grandfather, who was a great freedom fighter, a great orator, had never been to school, learned to read and write Punjabi and Hindi in jail, in British jails. And what he did became sort of imprinted on my mind, and I always felt politics was a noble calling because he was a noble man. I was in grade 11, and in fact, from grade 10, my father wanted me to be a medical doctor. And I studied all of the books I could get in the village school library on botany, zoology, physiology, anything to do with human body. And the day we were going to get admission, my father stopped me as I was going on the bike. He said, just hold on. And I stopped, and he said, I don't want you to become a doctor. I've been just talking to some friends, and they tell me that a doctor's life is hell because a doctor can be woken up any time in the villages, any time of the night or day, and you get a lot of disruptions in your life. Therefore, I want you to be an engineer, and so you can't take medical courses. That changed the direction of my life, and I had been prepared mentally to go into medicine. And I suddenly had to switch. You could never say no to a father at that time. I mean, they were giants. You were a little kid in grade 10. From that moment on, I lost interest in science subjects. And as a distraction, I started reading the most political newspaper of the day. It was called The Blitz, used to publish from Bombay. A bit left-leaning, not necessarily always truthful. I learnt later on, but that's what I started reading, hiding from my father. As I used to buy the Tribune for him daily from the city, I would read both. And so I became a lot more politically active and interested than in my studies. And my studies were neglected. I didn't really want to do sciences. I told my father. He didn't listen to me. I wanted to go to a different college. He couldn't afford it. We were poor. We were not rich at all. I rode a bike every day back to and from college. So it was kind of a very difficult time, and I probably would have become a scoundrel if I had stayed in India, because I started watching movies behind my father's back, going to cinemas. In those days, those used to be bad things for village kids who couldn't afford the fees for the school. And I was looking for an out. I wanted an out. And suddenly one day I'm sitting at the college. It was just winter, I think January or February. I'm sitting in the sun. It was a Saturday, and I'm ready to go back to my village. And a friend goes by and suddenly stops and says, oh, by the way, goodbye, and you and I may never see each other for a long, long time. And I said, what's happening? He said, I'm going to England. I said, well, do you mind telling me how you're going to England? And he told me the story of how he had sought admission at a particular college. So behind my father's back, he gave me the address. Behind my father's back, I wrote to England, got an application, and filled it out with the headmaster of our school, his assistants. I made him promise that he wouldn't tell my father, and then also got some money in a draft from England from a relative behind my father's back to attach to the application. And I sent the application in. My father so far didn't know. And then when the admission letter came, my father happened to be home that day, and he caught it from the postman, the postie, and he was very angry. He didn't want me to leave the country. He wanted my brother to leave the country, not me. And I had the hardest time persuading him to let me go. So he finally agreed with the intervention of my older brother to buy me a ticket and get me a passport and send me off to England. Of course, I didn't study because I had no money, but at least I was able to get admission to the United Kingdom, and the rest is history. In England, everything was strange. I mean, the funny thing was I got on the plane and I became friends with two professors from London University who were coming from a sabbatical in Australia, a white man and an Indian. And both of them actually gave me training on how to use the toilet, because I'd never seen a toilet like that before, how to use a fork and a knife right on the plane. And as we went through immigration, they stood one behind and one in front of me, essentially being my guardians, and took me through immigration without any problems. The same day, a plane load full of students coming from the same college were turned away from the airport. And I was just lucky that I was allowed into Britain. And as I landed in Britain at the airport, the funny thing was, I couldn't tell one white person from another. They all looked the same. I'm sure they have the same experience going into places like India or Africa. And the other thing that happened, I looked at the janitors who were cleaning the airport, and they had ties on and their uniforms. And suddenly all of these complexes that I had from India, from a poor background, people need to have creased pants or what kind of clothes you wear, all of them totally disappeared. Tie had no meaning. You could wear whatever you like. It was such a liberating sight for me. So all the complexes that I ever had disappeared in that one sight. I was making 1/3 the money in the jobs I had when I was going to evening classes in Britain, trying to get some O-levels done because it needed more time and study. And I tried to apply for a university. They said they'll take me to do my BA. The problems were, one, I had no money. Two, they said the requirement was that I had to do British history O-level. Along with the other stuff I had, they will accept me. I looked at British history O-level. I couldn't tell one King George from another, one Queen Elizabeth from another. It was totally alien to me, and I became frustrated. And just about that time, I had worked in the car parts factory. I worked in a factory making crayons. I made crayons. I had worked before in the railway, and then I actually edited a Punjabi weekly for about 12 weeks in London. I was the assistant editor. And it was there that, Enoch Powell had been making speeches, the Rivers of Blood speech that he made about expatriating immigrants back to their homes was around the time I left. And I was looking for an out from Britain because I wasn't going anywhere. And the funny thing was, when I was, I used to have the paper published in central London, so I would take the paper in hand and go by the train. As I was walking in Grosvenor Square, I see the sign for Canadian High Commission. My aunt was here. She had come here in the 50s, my mum's youngest sister. And I had read about Canada. It was a beautiful place. And I suddenly decided to walk into the Canadian High Commission. In those days, nobody used to come to Canada from Britain. They all thought it was a place that nobody wanted to go. And I walk in, and the two immigration officers were sitting, twiddling their thumbs, doing nothing. And they said they'll do an interview right now if I filled out the application. So I filled out the application. They did an interview. They said, "You got provisional approval, bring us the documents. Here's your medical, go get that done." And within about 3-4 weeks, I had a visa to come to England. And that's how I came. Around the same time as Enoch Powell was trying to kick immigrants out of Britain, I kicked myself out and came to Canada. It was just a sheer coincidence. The day I landed in Canada, it was May of 1968, and I remember it was a beautiful day. It was the small old airport at that time, and a 2-lane road, 1 lane either way, and my uncle picked me up, and I came home and I looked at the surroundings. You could see the ocean from the airport. You could see the mountains and green everywhere. It was just beautiful, and I decided that day it's either Vancouver, British Columbia, for the rest of my life, or back to Dosanjh Kala. Because either way, I wasn't going to go back to Britain. This was a far superior place in terms of the material wealth and the natural beauty of the place. And that's how I felt grounded. When I came here, it was home. And I started working in the lumber mill as an industrial first aid attendant. I had to do that course. My uncle got me that job. I tried looking for other jobs. I was either underqualified or overqualified, so lumber mill it was. I was pulling lumber off the green chain, and I hurt my back in the process.
Full lights, start sound, camera, action.
BabuKishan's Spotlight.
And with the back operation that happened in 1970, I could never go back to work on the chain because it was heavy. And I was already going to night school, working in the mill, doing my courses for my BA, and then I just went full-time, and my brother supported me. And before I finished my BA, I found my wife, and I got married to her. We met at college, Langara, when I was doing my BA. And I was at SFU. I hadn't finished my BA. We got married, and the rest is history about us. And then she supported me. I went into law. I did, after SFU BA, I did law at UBC. Had 3 children. 2 were born actually as I was still trying to complete my law degree. The 3rd was born actually a few days before the 1979 election, the first election I ever ran in. And I got into politics because I was in the lumber mill, and the IWA, International Woodworkers of America, at that time used to need people who spoke English reasonably well, and which I had simply learned listening to BBC radio. I didn't go to school to learn English. I, had whatever English I had from a village school in India. But then one thing led to another. The IWA took me to the NDP nomination meeting in 1969. I was able to vote because I was a member of the union at a nomination meeting, and I became a member. And then eventually in 1979, some people talked to me, and they wanted me to run, and I ran, and I lost 79, I lost 83, 2 elections. In 84, I tangled with the extremists, and that took about 6-7 years of my life. That kind of kept me busy for a few years. Therefore, I didn't run in the 86 election. I was practicing law, set up my own practice with a partner back in 79. And eventually in 89, I decided I'll run again in the next election for many reasons. That's a long story. And in 91, I won. That was my first election. I never thought I would ever win an election. I never thought I would ever become a cabinet minister. I never thought I'd ever become an attorney general, let alone a premier. And then, of course, I lost the election in 2001, which we knew we were going to lose. And I was happy that I lost because I wanted to be out of politics at that point. And then I went back to practice of law with my 2 lawyer sons. My 3rd son was still studying. He's now a cop. And I went back to practice with them. And then Paul Martin, the new Prime Minister of Canada after Jean Chrétien. Jean Chrétien was a friend because as a premier I met him many times. And Paul Martin, I knew, he came calling and said, would you run with us federally? And I said yes. And then, of course, had the privilege of serving in his cabinet as a Minister of Health for the country. So my life has been, it's been a dream. Not a dream that I ever dreamt that it would happen, but it's been like a dream. To a little kid from the villages, from the dusty village and the dusty roads, going to the Parliament of Canada, sitting in cabinet federally, or being the premier. it's been wonderful, and it's been a good life. But I got into politics because I believed social justice and equality is important, social justice is important, and I didn't go into politics to be something or somebody. And whatever I became was just a byproduct of why I went into politics. Canada's been good to me. It's been good to my family. My whole family is here now, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters. It's a great place, but it's still not a perfect society. It's a great society, not a perfect society. And that's why I got into politics, to make sure that we have equality and social justice. And there are lots of things that still need to be done. And I think as Canadians, new Canadians, we have a special obligation to make sure that we work to make Canada a more perfect society. And one of the things that stands out in my mind at this point, after the gay and lesbian equality that's now been achieved in Canada, generally speaking, violence against women still persists. Our Aboriginal communities are still suffering. We've made a mess of their lives as a society. I think we, the immigrants, who are visible minority immigrants in particular, can understand their plight perhaps better than others can. And if Canada is good to you, that we need to be good to the country to make sure it's a fairer, more just, more inclusive place for all Canadians, including the Aboriginal Canadians. I'm at a stage in life where I think I've tried to give back to Canada for what it did to me, because it was generous to me. But I'm now retired, and I'm now paying a little more attention to India, because India also was good to me. It nurtured me. It actually made me the kind of person I am. It gave me the grounding in ethics, morality, and politics that I have. And so I want to give something back to India too. And I'm now beginning to write blogs about India. I write about Canada. I blog at ujjaldosanjh.org, once or twice or thrice a month. And sometimes it's about Canada, sometimes it's about other international events. Quite often it's about India, because my place is the world, including India and Canada. As I said, I'm now retired. I'm now writing my memoir. Hopefully it will be published at some point. Along with that, I'm now writing a blog. I have decided that in the last few years of my life that I still am active in, I actually want to deal with India more so than any other place, because it's a place of my birth. I'm acutely aware of the difficulties it has, and I think that people like me who have experience elsewhere perhaps can make a difference as well as others. And I want to focus on corruption in India. Corruption is not just giving and taking money. Corruption is when we take our garbage, put it outside on the road. Corruption is when we promote our relatives and friends over and above others, when we don't pay attention to merit. Corruption is when we're unethical, we lie even a little. Corruption is when we're not just or fair to people. And so, I think that someone like me can make a difference, because I've tried to live my life in as good a fashion as I could. And so I'm more worried now about what I left behind. I'm here, this country is my country, Canada. It's the country of my children and grandchildren. They know no other country, but I do. Therefore, I have an obligation now that I'm kind of finished with the partisan politics in Canada. I have an obligation to pay back to the subcontinent as much as I can. And that's where my focus is.
For lights, start sound, camera, action.
BabuKishan's Spotlight. What in the blue hell is wrong with you? Are you still serious with this job? The company cannot afford to lose money. You were the best matchmaker in the city. Damn it.
I am the best. You know I believe it. I'm Cupid reincarnated.